instead of a ruin. When a power calls itself divine, it believes it cannot be outlived. We arranged to prove them wrong. Explain, Dex said. They gave us a choice, obedience or extinction. David looked past the console, past the catwalk, past the spotlights combing the sand, toward something no camera could hold. We chose a third thing, to become a civilization that doesn't live in cities or ships alone, one that also lives in us. Knowledge, culture, instructions, warnings, encoded, compressed, woven through biology. Burn our libraries and we'll still wake knowing the index. Are you declaring war? Dex asked. The war never ended, David said. The lights in his skin rose and fell once, and every display in the council chamber stuttered as if a finger had tapped the universe's projector. We changed battlefields. Back at the outpost, Tanay's lab drove the scan deeper. The quantum analyzers braided themselves into a noose of attention around the heart lattice and pulled. The network answered. Lines on 1,000,000 skins warmed. The first activations registered in systems with the most humans. Station habs, rim farms, embassy stacks. A trader on Kepler's orbit felt memories that weren't his arrive like rain. Blueprints, siege accounts, the taste of smoke from fires centuries cold. On military academies, cadets straightened in their bunks with sudden comprehension. In research nodes, impossible lemmas became solvable homework. Commander, Nay said, voice thin with too much astonishment to spare any for fear. We're seeing distributed ignition events across 300 systems. 200 million humans at least. How do we stop it? Voss asked. You don't, David answered from the catwalk without turning. You either learn with us or you run out of words for what we become. The desert wind threw sand like a curtain of knives against the container walls. The spotlights kept sweeping, as if motion could keep a secret from spreading. Inside the outpost, doors that had never argued with orders began to unlock at the sound of a name only the patterns knew. Outside the fence, something older than the council felt the first heat of a fire it thought it had drowned. The quantum wing sat like a steel heart deep inside the container maze, cables veining out into the night where spotlights swept smoke into silver ribbons. When David stepped into the chamber, the floor thrummed under his bare feet like something alive. Tunny watched from the glass box above with Reed and 3 other researchers, their reflections floating in the window like tired ghosts. She looked smaller tonight, as if the math had been stealing inches from her. Lie back, she said over the intercom, voice steady, eyes never blinking together. He lay on the platform. The patterns over his skin glowed faintly, pulsing in time with a rhythm the machines pretended they understood. The scanner powered up. No drama, only inevitability. A soft harmonic rose, then a second, then a braid of tones that suggested the machine was singing to itself while it worked. On the displays, David's body unfolded in layers, skin, muscle, nerve, bone. The marks didn't stop at the surface. They threaded deeper, wrapped vessels, mirrored neural paths, tucked meaning into living architecture the way smuggled blades tuck beneath bandages. Several hundred terabytes, Tnay breathed, not to impress anyone, only to give the impossible a number. Reed whispered active memory systems and no one corrected him. Data cascaded, not list, not logs, experiences. The chamber's central display flashed a battle that smelled of hot metal and bad air. The Proxima report came as full-body recall. Heat, smoke, shadows that ate the light and left the sky indifferent. When Tnay told the system another, the feed rewound the galaxy and dropped her into an older memory. First contact that wasn't a handshake. The enemy named themselves Eternal and asked for worship. The answer they received was stubborn and short. War followed, long enough to grind centuries into ash. Voss arrived to the observation deck with the disciplined calm of a storm bunker. The densest knot of pattern burned under David's sternum, a map inside a lock inside a body. There, he said, pointing with the weight of a man who had run out of easier choices. Tnay already knew. Her instruments had been circling that heart lattice like cautious carrion birds. Priority translation, she ordered. The AI hesitated, the way a dog does at a door that smells wrong. Warning. Deep analysis may trigger active responses. Proceed, she said, because curiosity has always believed it could outrun consequence. The outpost seemed to feel the decision. The wind threw grit along the catwalk rails until it hissed. In the chamber, the scanner's harmonics thickened. On the deck, status hollows multiplied like mirrors. Screens daisy-chained. Diagnostics argued. Alarms arrived a breath later. offended they'd been invited so late. A voice on the facility net said something about an energy surge from the human cell, then broke into static as the displays pixelated, only for an instant, like a blink. David sat up within that blink, lines burning brighter. Face turned not toward the glass but toward whatever the glass thought it was hiding. "You wanted to know what we carry," he said. "Now you've asked the right way." The translation header stamped across the main pane as if forged there. Prometheus Protocol. Final phase implementation. Not a weapon schematic, but a civilization design. A plan to pour a people into their own genome so cities could burn and culture would not. Phase 1, survive. Phase 2, integrate. Phase 3, prepare. Phase 4, awaken. The plan assumed gods could smash worlds. It did not assume they could kill memory. "Communications," Reed said, practically leaning through the glass. "Doctor, look." The resonance metrics spiked out of chart bounds, then redrew their axes like embarrassed rulers. Signals leapt, not through wires, not through air, but through that less polite place where distance loses arguments. The AI called it quantum entanglement, because naming things helps people not scream. If true, every human was a node in a network older than the outpost, faster than the fear in this room. In the desert yard, a spotlight cut across a spill of smoke and caught nothing. Inside the chamber, David's pattern steadied from storm to tide. He closed his eyes like a door that knew its hinges. The outpost held its breath and listened for whatever came next. Down the corridor, locks that believed in procedure were about to meet a voice that did not. And outside the fence, the dark felt a warmth it remembered from a very old war. They felt it first on the far side of the stars, not in the room. Kepler's trade ring, dented panels, honest grime, watched a human merchant rest his hand on a terminal and change the mood of an entire station. Tom Bradley's skin lit to the tempo of the main bus, and the machine bent like a tired gate giving way to a familiar key. Administrative access bloomed on screens that usually took decades of clearances and favors. "Friend Tom," said clerk, his 6 hands full of worry. "Security requests all humans report." Tom smiled like a problem had finally admitted it was solvable. Every display on the ring went to the same message. Humanity is not your enemy. We fight only those who claim dominion over the free. Remain calm. Through council space, echoes propagated. On garrison stacks, human non-coms slipped into comms with a competence that felt like destiny wearing a uniform. On research nodes, problems that had been careers became mornings. In embassy cubes, ambassadors unfolded capabilities the way a host unfolds extra chairs when more guests arrive than expected. In every place the species had taken root, the patterns warmed and the quiet changed. Back in the desert compound, emergency lighting painted the catwalks the color of old blood. Somewhere below, a generator coughed and caught. "Grid failure," someone reported with the baffled anger of machinery that had been promised loyalty. Lisa Park, smuggling conviction, engineering hands, rewired a system she had never studied and made it obey. Doors unlatched with obedient little sighs all across maximum security. Prisoners, human and not only human, stepped into corridors like actors who'd learned the new script in their sleep. Voss found David in a main thoroughfare where the smoke pooled in slow eddies and spotlights drew bars across the floor. Guards stacked behind the commander, weapons raised, breath synchronized by training and fear. "It ends now," Voss said, a stone choosing the hill it will be. David cocked his head slightly, not disrespect, calculation. "My people fought 3 centuries against enemies who turned physics into a hobby," he said. "Projectiles don't frighten us." The lines across his body pulsed once like a desert heartbeat under floodlight. Every weapon answered by dying. Sparks. Silence. The smell of hot metal. The kind of quiet that arrives only after a lesson. "How?" Voss began, then stopped because the word felt too small. "We learned from very good teachers," David said, almost gentle. "Every network speaks if you speak its language. Every system can be convinced." Somewhere behind the commander, a door announced its freedom with a cheerful chime that didn't match the atmosphere. On the council emergency channel, reports piled up in Dex's queue. Shipping lanes coordinated with frightening elegance. Theoretical problems knocked down like bottles on a rail. A merchant on Kepler with admin privileges he technically didn't have telling everyone to breathe. Dex listened and did not reach for panic, only for pattern. In Tanae's lab, The analytics wall stitched together a shape from 1,000 feeds. Activations across 300 star systems, 200 million humans at minimum. The network was fully awake now, and the outpost's instruments were the wrong tools to measure it. You wanted to know what humans are capable of, David told the glass above him earlier, as if narrating the present for people who hadn't yet arrived in it. Now everyone was here. The council chamber, air recycled too many times, patience recycled fewer, argued itself raw. Containment, said some. Law, said others. Fear versus principle in the oldest debate that ever wore clothing. Dex called for analysis and heard the answer she'd dreaded. If aggression came, there was no defense that didn't begin with surrender. But aggression wasn't what the feeds showed. They showed a species rearranging the room, setting extra chairs, opening a window. Nim said as much. Krell disagreed on principle. Principle had never stopped a good panic. In the yard outside the containers, the desert wind clawed at chain link and rattled it like teeth. In the sky above the floodlights, stars practiced indifference. Inside the compound, the story refused to. The outpost thought it held a single prisoner. The council thought it faced a single crisis. By the time the sun cut the desert open, both would understand they'd been speaking to a chorus. Dex did the most dangerous thing a leader can do in a room full of fright. She asked for the truth. What is the Prometheus protocol? The answer came from a catwalk microphone half-choked with dust. A human touching the lattice over his heart and calling it by name. It's how we live through gods. Not by building bigger knives, but by becoming harder to erase. Memory as infrastructure. Culture as seed stock. A civilization poured into bodies so thoroughly that the fire would keep even if the cities didn't. He told them the part every myth leaves out. The enemy's confidence. The Eternals wore eternity like armor, convinced that time owed them rent. They demanded knees. Humans answered with spines. When worlds fell, the plan changed. The battlefield moved from space to skin. David did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Every display in the chamber flickered anyway, as if the light itself had remembered something it was embarrassed to forget. The war never ended, he said. It just moved. Below the glass, the heart lattice translation unspooled in a clean, inexorable font. Not a blueprint for a bomb, a blueprint for survival that behaves like a species. Encode everything. Spread everywhere. Sleep until called, then wake all at once. The wake word was pressure. The instrument Tene pointed at David had provided it. Massive entanglement cascade, the facility AI reported. Because even machines resort to understatement when staring at a miracle with teeth. Endpoints beyond count, nodes waking faster than tracking, a record told through the senses of those who had lived, then died, then lived again, as story. The record bled into origin. A scout called New Horizons meeting a column of living light near Alpha Centauri, a name that said worship and expected gratitude. A captain who sent back the only reply humanity ever truly trusted. We kneel before no one. It took 307 years for the argument to reach a pause. In that time, stars moved like pawns, and human stubbornness paid in currencies the council still measured badly. But they learned. Every defeat a note, every loss an index entry, every dead hero an annotated proof. Rules can be hacked. Systems can be convinced. Even gods run on something. The chamber returned to the present with the soft cruelty of recycled air. Reports flooded. Trade routes falling into step with impossible precision, research riddles dissolving like salt, a merchant on Kepler turning system admin while asking everyone to stay calm. If they choose aggression, Voss had said, we have no defense. But the feeds again showed something else. Orchestration without conquest, assertion without blood. Nim kept repeating that in different words. Krell kept translating it into threat. Dex let both live long enough to prove themselves. Back at the outpost, Voss still stood in a corridor that smelled like scorched circuitry and desert dust. His weapons lay quiet at his boots. He did not reach for them. He looked at the man who had unmade them with a pulse and said, not without respect, "What do you want?" David's answer was simple enough to be suspicious. "For you to be ready." The lattice over his heart warmed, and the air felt a fraction thinner, as if the compound had climbed a mountain without moving. "They never left," he said into the facility net, to Dex, to the listening dark under the rocks. "They got subtle. Subtlety fails. When they act in the open again, you'll need allies who've already bled for this lesson. Across folded space, something old stirred, annoyed to find the lights on. Quantum signatures pulsed in patterns